Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind, our 89th episode. We're back. We're doing it again, the thing we do. Niles,
Wow.
how have you been the last couple weeks since we talked about Furiosa?
I've been good. I got a new job, which is exciting, and haven't started it just yet. But yes, thank you. Very proud of my achievement. But it'll be fun to get that going. And yeah, we spent some good time up in the mountains, kind of getting away up to Steamboat. That was just lovely. And otherwise it's just been, I feel like, busy as always. How about you, Dylan? How have you been?
Yeah, same. Our friend group did a whole trip up to Steamboat into the mountains. Had a great time, relaxing like emotionally, but the drinking and food took a toll on my body. I don't know about you, but it was a lot.
Me too. Yeah, it was a lot for sure.
Yeah, good times. Also super busy, and it is hot. It is very, very hot. But you know, that's it. That's all that's going on. But we decided, there's a lot of TV shows that we're watching right now that we'll talk about later on, and a couple movies are out. But we decided to stretch our film viewing and reviewing muscles a little bit and challenge ourselves this week. And we decided to watch a new film called The Beast. It is a French film, and The Beast follows Gabrielle Monnier as she navigates her emotions and confides in a man named Luis that she has this fear of some catastrophe that will wreak havoc on her life. The Beast is directed by Bertrand Bonello and written by Bonello, Guillaume Breaud, and Benjamin Charbrit, and stars Leah Seydoux, George McKay, and Guzlahi Malada. And yeah, Niles, what are your initial non-spoilery thoughts on The Beast?
Le Bé.
Le Bé.
I think that's how you pronounce it, but yeah, it is challenging for us,
Mm-hmm.
I think, to watch this movie and to talk about it, because it definitely pushed us outside of our comfort zone. I think that the movie, like you alluded to, it's French Canadian. They speak French basically the whole time, but they also, switch between French and English on occasion, which is nice for us Americans to keep up there. But it is kind of a jarring viewing experience for us, because I think that you and I were so accustomed to American cinema experiences. And I personally, I don't actively seek out these kinds of international foreign films. So it was definitely a little bit of a challenge, because I think that there's a lot of differences between, if you watch this film by Bonello, you can see just how different the style is from American films. It feels like this very high, densely packed art film. There's not a lot of music or noise. It's very quiet, but there's some very unique stylistic choices throughout, where just kind of the whole aesthetic changes, which is fascinating. And then you have these strong punctuations of raw emotion throughout. It feels like sci-fi merged with romance, merged with thriller, merged with drama. Like, there's kind of this blend of various genres here, and I don't think that you see a lot of that in American cinema. So I think that it was a little bit of a learning curve, those first 30 minutes in this film for me.
Yeah, I found, I really enjoyed watching this, and I enjoy feeling challenged by art, and I think that's something that everybody could use more of. And it's important to remember, too, we are, everybody thinks of Hollywood and American movies, and American film culture has sort of spread and become this global thing, but there are different, film industries all over the world. France is one of them. Australia has their own film industry too. Right. India has a huge film industry. And it is everywhere does. And it is healthy and good to experience that. I will admit, I feel a little out of my depth discussing and reviewing this movie, but we're going to do our best. And I think we will be a better show and better at this for having done this. Like I said, we're like stretching our muscles a little bit. We're trying to expand our skill set here, but
For
like
real.
really strong performances, I would say, that really tie each of the narrative sort of eras together. And I found it very satisfying as the film progressed, how everything started to tie back in on itself. There was a little while earlier on where I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not totally seeing how this clicks together, but it kind of, by a certain point in the film, I'm like seeing these narrative beats play out, and I'm like, okay, I really like how this is calling back to, you know, things from earlier. But yeah, I would say like outside of our wheelhouse for sure, like we talk about comic book movies and like action adventure and sci-fi stuff,
Right.
which this is sci-fi as well, but I enjoyed this a lot. Do you have any other sort of big spoiler-free thoughts before we just kind of go for it?
For sure, yeah. I agree with you, Dylan, because, yeah, I thought this was actually a very good movie. Once you get into it and get into the flow of it, it pulls you in, I would say, especially that second half, in my opinion. And I think I encourage our listeners, anyone who's listening today, to check out the movie, even if you don't really like foreign films or international films, excuse me, just like films that are not American. Because it challenges you as an audience member. It definitely challenged us, and it also exposes you to new perspectives in filmmaking. I feel like this movie, it almost merits a second watch because there's so much in here. There's recurring motifs that are fascinating and layered. There's these different storylines, these different timelines. There's just so much here, and I feel like I got probably 75% of it. There's probably a lot that I didn't pick up on throughout, but I definitely want to watch it again because I feel like it's just so rich, and it makes me want to go check out the other movies by Bonello. Apparently he's directed some other really cool films. I can't recall what those are off the top of my head, but I want to check it out. And, you know, he just seems like a really innovative French filmmaker. And I just want to see what else he has to say. I think he did like some kind of zombie movie that was like less about zombies and more about colonialism. And so I want to check that out and see what that's about there. But yeah, I would say, the two leads, you know, Seydoux, is that how you pronounce her name?
Leah Seydoux.
Seydoux, thank you. Leah Seydoux, George McKay, phenomenal jobs. They basically played multiple roles within this movie. Like, you don't always see that in films. It's kind of usually just you're assigned a character and you stick with it for the old time. And the fact that they did multiple, it's pretty impressive. And I think that they delivered pretty strongly at rounding out those characters so they didn't feel identical.
Yeah, and they're like, because they, slight spoiler, but like they're like variations of the same people, but they are distinct from each other, regardless of that. But just going back to what you said about like, even if you don't like foreign language films or international films, I was reminded of this quote from Bong Joon-ho. I believe it was from his Oscars acceptance speech for Parasite. He's the director of Parasite and Snowpiercer are the two films of his that I've seen. But he said, once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films. So I think just a good sentiment from him. And it is something that us, especially as Americans, we get caught doing our America-centric thing and only watching American or English language films. And cinema is much more vibrant and rich than that, and you know, the art form deserves more curious viewers, and that includes exploring other languages.
Agreed.
But, yeah. Should we jump into spoiler stuff a little bit now?
Let's do it. Yeah, why not?
All right.
I feel like that's the best way to talk about this movie.
Yeah.
The Beast.
Yeah, so the film, it kind of jumps between multiple eras and lifetimes for our two main characters. We visit 1910, 2014, and 2044. it's very possible that within the universe of the story, these characters have lived many, many more lives in between that, but we follow these three. And in 1910, Gabrielle is a Parisian pianist who decides ultimately to leave her husband and finds herself drawn to Louis, a man who she's come across one time before and divulged this secret to. And then they are ultimately killed by drowning in an electrical fire during the real-life event, the Great Flood of Paris. And then in 2014, we again follow Gabrielle. This time she is a model and aspiring actress house-sitting in Los Angeles, and circumstance causes her to cross paths with an incel version of Louis this time. Very reminiscent of the real-life Isla Vista shooter who ultimately murders her. I am choosing not to use his name in our podcast because, we don't want to immortalize these people. But if you... like Lewis's car vlog, if you've seen the real-life video, you know exactly who it's referencing. A very terrifying video. But and then we also have the 2044 story where Gabrielle undergoes a procedure to cleanse her DNA of her like emotions and memories of past lives. And it causes her to relive those memories, and she comes across Louis again in this lifetime, and while her procedure does not work, his does, and their potential love is cut short as he loses his capacity for true human emotion. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, right. There's these three different timelines, and then there's also, forgot to put it in the show notes here, but there's also kind of a fourth timeline, you could argue, of like the intro. It's kind of this green screen area where she's like doing kind of some acting. They're like, there's going to be a beast right here and you need to react to it, and then she does. And I think that they go back to that green screen room a few times, like maybe once or two more times, doing other things. But I wasn't quite sure where that fit in, if that was its own thing or if that was just like totally unrelated at all. I have no idea. Because that could have been like the 2014, but I don't know.
Right. Well, and it, her haircut most resembles that era, but also I saw a review theorize that it could just be Sidhu as herself inserted in there. But I don't really know. But that sequence that is how the climax of the 2014 storyline plays out in terms of geography and the play out of the final like sequence there. But this is actually... apparently it's a loose adaptation of something. So you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it is a loose adaptation of Henry James's novella from 1903, The Beast in the Jungle, which I have not read, but I got the Spark Notes version for the episode. So I understand the story as much as I can right now without reading it. But in this novella, it tells the story of this protagonist named John Marcher. He's a man who's just kind of overcome with this belief that his life is to be defined by some catastrophic or spectacular event. Something is lying in wait for him just around the corner. It could just be anything. He has no idea what it is. He just thinks that this fate is going to befall him. He's a hopeless fatalist, really. It's just like this thing around the corner, the beast in the jungle, whatever that is, it's coming. He always thinks that it is. Throughout the story, he gets reacquainted with this woman called May Bartram, who he met previously about 10 years earlier, but they get reacquainted, they catch up a little bit, but he never really allows her to get close to him. And he kind of keeps her at arm's length. He wastes the best years of his life awaiting this great misfortune. It's just always on top of him. He's always anticipating it. And by the end of the book, he just realizes he's caused the great catastrophe of his life by throwing it away, really, because he didn't really let himself experience love. He had this opportunity with this woman to really have that opportunity, this experience in life, and he didn't do it because he couldn't bear the thought of like developing this relationship and then having it pulled away from him. He just couldn't stand for that. So that's what this movie is based on, The Beast.
Okay.
And I think it was kind of interesting during my research too. I found out that there was another French film released the same year, 2023,
Mm-hmm.
called The Beast in the Jungle, which was another adaptation of the novel. So it's just kind of interesting that you had these two films come out around the same time.
Yeah. So it almost seems like the 1910 era of this movie is the most direct adaptation of that short story, just with the characters gender swapped.
Yes.
And the sort of great misfortune, I think we'll circle back to at the end when we talk about what the Beast is. So let's save that for that part of the discussion. But one thing that really surprised me too was just how much of the film was in English. Like,
Yeah.
I genuinely wasn't expecting that. Like, it's there's some parts early on in the first era, the 1910 era, where our two leads switch from French to English. And then there's a whole section later on, the 2014 section that takes place in Los Angeles, that's just entirely in English. And I genuinely was not expecting that.
Yeah, the flips between the languages is fascinating, and it's as a viewer, it's a little jarring for a second of just like, oh, they're talking in English, oh, they're talking in French, but it is nice, and I was wondering like what is the significance of them switching back and forth between English and French. I was at least in that first like the 1910 section where they did that more often. It was like it seemed coded, like I was curious why they were doing that.
Yeah, so I think if I'm remembering correctly, those two characters first met in England, and so their relationship was established in an English-speaking place. So I think that's part of the reason why, and also what they're talking about is like this secret, the Beast, the catastrophe, and he's the only person she's ever told about that. So it kind of felt like, since they're in an environment surrounded primarily by French speakers, they were kind of switching to a language and giving themselves a little bit of privacy. So I think that's how I interpreted it. At least.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah. But what I also thought was kind of funny was like, we may have talked about this before on the show, but when I'm watching a foreign language film or a series, like, it always takes me a few minutes to kind of get in sync with it, to where I've like found out my rhythm of reading the subtitles, looking at and taking the visuals and stuff like that. And I had like gotten into sync with it, and I was like feeling comfortable, feeling good. And then they switched to English, and it took me a second to realize, like, wait, I'm not reading subtitles anymore. They went away. It's my language now.
Like, oh shit, I gotta put on my ears again.
Yeah.
There was as we're kind of getting more into some of these, the timelines, we're going to go into them kind of one at a time here pretty soon. But there was a quote that I saw online in an article on a website, the In Review Online website. And I just kind of stumbled across it. I was doing research on this, and I thought it was a pretty decent summary of our leads and the Beast in general, I think. The author, for context, they were talking about the novella when they made this quote, but I think it's applicable to both. And that quote is, "Doomed they are, however, not as lovers, but as precisely those for whom love proves elusive and impossible." And I think that's very fitting for Gabrielle and Louise in this movie, because they feel like they're kind of these ships crossing in the night, these star-crossed lovers who are kind of flirting with the idea of love with each other, and they get so close each time. Maybe not so much the 2014 one, because that's a little bit more stalkery and incel shit, but they're at least in the 1910 and the 2044, and they're kind of flirting with this idea of love, and they're circling around it, but they can't quite get to it, to that kind of true passionate human emotion, and they're kind of constantly cut short of achieving that reality. And it's tragic. It's very heartbreaking to see that happen time and time again to these two leads.
Yeah, and that also ties back into the Beast itself, and how it's like, I think it's like Gabrielle describes it as her premonition or whatever, but I think it applies to both characters, and how they just kind of, like you were talking about earlier, like in the novella, like they kind of waste their time worrying about the Beast and end up it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
And just one more stray note before we get into like the different plot sections, but it's an entirely different film, and it uses this concept in a very different way. But just the concept of this sort of soul passing from life to life across eras reminded me of Cloud Atlas by the Wachowski sisters.
Oh yeah.
Not a widely beloved film, but I love it a lot. And in every era, there's like one of the characters has his birthmark on their back, and the idea is sort of this same soul moves through the eras and in through these different lives. One of the lines in the movie is like, "Our lives is not our own," and a big part of it is how like people exist on this broader tapestry of life that spans across centuries and longer than human lives. And I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
You know, when I was watching, I haven't seen Cloud Atlas, but yeah, when I was watching this movie, I kept thinking about that story too, because I've seen snippets of it where I was just like, oh yeah, this feels like Cloud Atlas, because they look the same between the eras, they got the same name and everything, like they're the same souls, just coming through with these past lives. It's yeah, but I need to watch that movie still.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a rewind on it at some point. I think that'd be fun.
I like that.
Yeah, but let's start with, we'll just go through each section, like each era, I guess. So we can start with the 1910 life, which is in Paris, leading up to the Great Flood of Paris, which I actually didn't know was a thing that happened, but it did.
Yeah, I had no idea either. I was like, what the hell? Where did all this water come from when they opened the door? All these people just left literally minutes ago, and now they're stuck in the factory about to die. But yeah, I had no idea about those either. I like it when they can weave in that historical context. And again, this is why you watch movies that are not just from Hollywood. You go branch outside and you learn something new about the Great Floods of Paris. But yeah, the 1910 life for Gabrielle Louis, this is definitely the most faithful adaptation of the novella, because Gabrielle, she even confesses to Louis at a certain point, just like, yeah, we've been talking about it, this weight of this unnamed catastrophe. She's just got this ever-present anxiety and this fear of this. So it's very similar to the protagonist of the book, literally here. And she's also hesitant to let go of the love that she has with her husband, because she says it multiple times. I love my husband. He's a great guy. He does all this good for me. But she also is torn between him and Louis. She sees the life that she could have and the love that they have, the passion. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, he's like comfortable, I think, for her.
Yes.
Yeah, and I what I thought was, and this is just my own fucking ignorance, I guess, but as the movie was starting, I wasn't sure if it was actually in like the 1910s or early 1900s, or if it was just because we've already seen the far future sequences. I was like, oh, is this Paris before whatever this post-apocalypse is? And it's just an alternate reality where they dress in this style for whatever reason. Because I didn't know about the flood, because I just didn't know. I was like, oh, this is the catalyst that leads to this dystopia that we're seeing now. Which it feels so stupid now. But like, no. It's just
hey, that's okay. I thought when I was first watching it, I was like, is this like the Renaissance? Like, or is this like, is she about to, or like peasants about to break through the gates and like take them to the stockades to chop off their heads and stuff? Like, how old is this time period? Like, maybe they flashed a title card of 1910, and maybe I missed it. But yeah, I thought it was much older than it was.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the opening scenes of this the most. I think as they're reacquainting themselves with each other and like walking from room to room, and people keep asking, "Where's your husband?" or she's asking, it's like he's always in the other parlor, or like I don't know, maybe he's in the other room, and he's just like, I think, but it's very apparent that I think you get just from these exchanges, the relationship between these three characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
she doesn't know where her husband is. It doesn't seem like a huge urgent thing to her to find him either. But she knows he's there, and they'll link back up eventually. But for now, she's more interested in this other guy. But
Yeah.
she does eventually return to her husband at the end of the sequence. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right there. That's I liked that scene overall. I think that this time period for me personally was the most uninteresting one. Just because I think this, like, the historical period piece of like this kind of aristocratic society in a way, I feel like we've just seen it so many times between Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen and all these other kind of stories. But that's just me,
Yep.
because I think that this is still a very solid story. And to its credit, the story here is very unique and different because it's about this married woman leaving her husband for another man, kind of falling in love when she's already in love, I suppose, with this other man. And they leave, they abscond together, but then they die once they finally have this chance to, or before they have this chance to really experience
before they do
their life together, their love to the fullest. And I thought that was just a very heartbreaking ending to these two characters here.
Yeah. Well, and it's like there just is an example of just effective storytelling and filmmaking here, right? Where it's like he goes to light up his cigarette in the factory, and then someone's like, no, this shit's really flammable. You can't do that here. And it's just a little bit of setup, payoff, and then the water gets into the factory and causes the electrical fire, and then it's like, oh no, oh no.
Yeah.
Like,
shit.
It's not like revolutionary or anything, but like call out good fundamentals when you see them,
Yeah, totally.
And then like next, so it's interesting because we're in the dystopia future throughout the entire film, right? But then we're sort of in the old era, the 1910s, during the first half, and I think we leave it behind in favor of the 2014 life about halfway through the film, right? So we kind of get two storylines going on at the same time in each half of the film. And
yeah. I really liked the structure of this film because it cuts between the future or the present and the past in very intriguing ways. And I thought the 2014 life, it was probably the most exhilarating part of the story for me, because you go from this romance, this romantic idea of just this dreamy man has come into my life and now I'm going to run away with him, it's amazing, and then it gets cut short, and then now you have a completely opposite story about this woman who is very isolated and lonely and just trying to get by in life, and she just being stalked by this creepy incel who hates women, and it is so suspenseful the whole time.
Yeah, I would say of the like three storylines, this is, and not just because of where it takes place, but this is the most Hollywood adjacent of the three, right? Like, it's very thriller coded in a lot of ways, and just from the moment Lewis shows up, where he's talking about, it's like, beautiful morning here, and I'm filming my little video, I'm like, I just got a pit in my stomach, because even before he launches into what he's talking about, it's like, I know this type of guy, I know exactly what he's gonna say, and it was just like, fuck.
You could just call it from a mile away. This guy,
it's like I clocked it. Like shout out to the hair and makeup and the costume departments, because just by looking at him immediately, I'm like, oh, incel.
Yep. Yeah, you can tell very quickly what his motive is, and that he's these kinds of just this mentality. It's so aggravating because he's like, he sees himself as so superior and just this pinnacle of excellence in society. He's like, but no woman wants me. It's like, dude, you got your head so far up your own ass. It's unreal. I can't stand it.
Yeah, but it's like and it felt so real because I think he's very much based on a specific real guy.
Yes.
And the scene later on when he's in his car talking about retribution against all women for like the perceived slights against him, like that is referencing a very specific person in a very specific murder spree, as I mentioned earlier. And it's like, God, these people are so frustrating. And we had a whole, if you want to hear us talk about incels, check out our Don't Worry Darlin' episode from,
yes, that's right.
Fuck, like early last year or something, where I we have like an 8-minute detour where we explain the lore behind inceldom and Jordan Peterson's relationship to it. So
yes,
go enjoy
that
somewhere.
Yes. Check it out. It's fun.
Yeah, but incels are not fun in real life, but they're really terrifying, and it's a very dangerous mindset and ideology, and
yeah, it is frightening to me. The whole time when I was watching him too, I just couldn't stop thinking about there's got to be so many men out there who feel like he does, or like kind of resemble his character to a certain degree. Like there's got to be so many incels out there who just view themselves so narcissistically and hate women, and it's frightening and disgusting that's happening. But that's just a gut assumption. I don't know the actual numbers, but I'm sure there's plenty of people out there like that, and that sucks.
Well, and the problem is too, it's like it's like a spiral, right? They fall into that mindset, and then there's a whole community of them that reinforce the mindset, and there is a market for people to create content that reinforces that mindset. So now there are people with a business motive to keep people in that cycle, which, you know, like once you're in there, it's kind of like you're stuck. From what I understand, and it's pretty terrifying if, you know, but
right.
I feel like this storyline too, it really fucks with us more than the other two do. Like it manipulates us with false hope that things here might work out, right? Like we have pretty, relatively speaking, long sequences where Gabrielle is like fantasizing almost, or imagining false reality. Like, I don't know exactly what's going on or how I'm supposed to interpret it. Again, I feel a little out of my depth in some elements of this film, but it's like we see them hooking up, but it's actually another guy. And she thought it was him. She invited him into the house and he said no, and then he comes in anyway, but it's not really him. It's the other guy. And then at the end, you know, when she's like, I'm going to open the door, trust me, we see like, 3 or 4 times it playing out in a positive way.
Yeah.
But again, like with the beginning of the sequence, the entire time I'm like, girl, do not open that fucking door. Do not. Like, stop.
Yeah, you got to be that one person in the theater. Come on, don't go in there. You know?
Yeah. It was... And it just makes it even more devastating at the end, because like we hard cut from like one of the false visions where it looks like she's talked him down and things are going to be okay. Hard cut to her dead in the pool with him holding the gun. Like,
yeah, it's devastating, and you know that those they feel like glitches in a way, but also memories simultaneously, which is a fascinating detail. And you know, when you go from a romance in 1910 to this 2014 stalker story, it is on opposite ends. It really feels so vastly different, and I think they both have their own fears here. And like you were saying earlier, I think the Beast, it also is affecting Louis too, because he's in this whole 2014 life, he's just hyper fixating on this fear that he has of just, I think, being alone, being
Yeah.
or not being with a woman, being a virgin in today's life or today's reality. And I think he's just a very afraid person, which it's heartbreaking on both sides, Gabrielle
Yeah.
and
Well, and
Louise.
he's like cemented in his worldview, right? And he refuses to acknowledge that there might be a possibility of something different, even when the evidence of that is like screaming at him in his face. But it did feel like glitches. And I'm going to be a dumb asshole for a moment.
Do it.
Because a little bit of her in this machine laying down, reliving memories of past lives and experiencing desynchronization like glitches was kind of Assassin's Creed-y a little bit.
Ooh, yeah.
I am being an asshole comparing this like very artistic and wonderful film to Assassin's Creed, but it's kind of there, a little bit reliving. They're talking about through the memories of past lives through the DNA. And the glitches are like maybe is trying to make these things work out in the past lives, but she's desynchronizing because that's not what happened. I apologize to our audience for that comparison.
Hey, I liked it. I like that. Yeah, I did not make that connection in my head. I was like, when I saw her like kind of just in the black bath, I'm just kind of like, that looks like the bath that the guy from Dune is in, like all the time.
Oh, Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah, the Baron. Yeah, that's all I could think of. I was like, it's the Baron. But
it's Stellan Skarsgård. But yeah, I think let's transition to that 2044 life and the whole storyline about this memory bath thing.
These whole like sequences in the present day 2044, they kind of reminded me just the way they were shot and styled. Like some of them had like kind of a, God, what was it? I mean, first of all, the ratio was kind of weird.
Yeah, the aspect ratio is 4:3.
Yeah, the aspect ratio in those sequences was, it was bizarre. But then they also, like in some scenes, they had like kind of this blue overlay with stripes on like one corner of the screen, but it didn't go all the way around, so it's kind of like compressed the view in a way.
Yeah.
But then there were all these.
When she's in that room, yes, that was interesting.
Yeah,
when she's being like interviewed.
Yeah, and just like the framing of some of the shots, like some of the props in the backgrounds, the style of the clothing, the nightclub playing, the nightclub playing 80s music, the faceless interviewers, it all kind of felt like I was watching a movie shot in the 80s trying to predict what the future is going to look like, like it just kind of had that feel to it of a David Lynch movie set in the 80s or something like that. Just something a little odd and out there. Yeah. Like, this is what we think it's going to look like. Everyone's going to wear gray clothing and they're going to walk around with masks outside. And, it's kind of true, but
yeah. Well, several reviews I read before recording actually did call it somewhat Lynchian. I am embarrassingly unversed in David Lynch's work. I've been familiar with the guy for forever, obviously, and I know vaguely what makes something Lynchian, but I need to dive into his stuff more. But going back to that aspect ratio element, because it was and I think the 2014 one has a slightly narrower aspect ratio as well, but like still full screen. The one in the 1910s, I think, took up the whole TV, but
I think so.
The 4:3 made this whole sequence feel very claustrophobic, and I think that ties in really well with how emotionally stunted the entire society is because they've all had this weird procedure. And also, just a note on the nightclub, did you notice that every time she goes to it, the name and the era that it's showcasing has changed?
Oh, that's right.
It's 80s the first time, it's 70s the second time, and then in the third time when she goes back and it's just him with her, it's the 60s, I think.
You're right. You were absolutely right there. I did not realize that when I was watching it.
Yeah, just a fun little thing. But and I'm sure there's more meaning to that too that I'm not quite picking up on. But I want to talk about too what I'll call an ambiguously caused dystopia. I think it's so interesting that they never dive into why the world is the way it is, but they've determined that emotions are dangerous. That's what the log line on like IMDb says. We get a reference to an American Civil War that broke out while she was living there or just after she moved away from America. A great tragedy of 2025 is mentioned by the like AI thing she speaks to, which like it's right around the corner, so that's fun.
I can't wait to see what that is.
And then you also get several people, including Gabrielle, wearing these like masks that are like red glass over their face, but not everybody wears them. Like Kelly, the doll, does not wear one, which I found very interesting. And then, of course, the people living pretty devoid of emotion. And there's that very weird and disturbing moment where when Gabrielle is on the like phone with her friend or whoever it is, she is just like, oh, my cat's been sick, so I couldn't make it, but he'll be fine, and then just emotionlessly strangles it. Wow.
Yeah, that was a little weird. I wasn't entirely clear what was going on because it was such a quick shot, but I was like, okay, that didn't look right.
Well, I think it was just because she's had the procedure and she doesn't have emotion anymore, so she's like, well, my cat is ill. I'm going to solve this problem in the most efficient way possible by eliminating its need to get better.
Yeah, it is. Wow, that's depressing. Yeah, it's a very dystopian world, and it's very potent for today. You know, we talk about AI here sometimes on this podcast, and I think you and I were not super big fans of it, especially since it's taking more creative jobs away from creative people. And this reality of 2044 in the Beast, it feels like a very on the nose warning of just this is where we could be heading, and because it's all just AI at that point, because AI just makes the decisions better. They know how to take away the emotional human factor, and that just results in better, more logical outcomes. And you see the logic of how we get there, and it is terrifying. It feels like a warning message.
Well, yeah, it's like enforced docility or docileness. I don't know what the actual word is, but yeah, and they talk about this like purification process. What's the word they use to describe Gabrielle at the beginning? It's
I don't remember.
Not agitated, but something. It's like they're trying to. What I found interesting too is she's not forced to do it. She's just very heavily encouraged in order to get a better job. Like her emotional range is like imposing a glass ceiling on her career. So she makes this decision to do it based on that, which I found very intriguing.
It's like if you can remove your emotion from the equation, then you're qualified for a higher job or something that has more meaning. And she's very conscious of this DNA purification process, and she sees it for what it is the entire time. It's a sterilization of human expression and experience. And throughout the movie, it seems like she's oscillating between wanting to go through the entire procedure, and she does, and not wanting to do it at all. But by the end of the movie, it's like, well, it wasn't effective on you. You're part of the 0.7% of the population where the procedure doesn't work. So sorry, there's nothing we can do to help you. But yeah, it is kind of this this dystopian question of what's more important to you, human emotion and experience, or work that is meaningful for you. And it's a terrible, terrible decision to make.
Yeah. Yeah, and that reminded me of a note that I wanted to put in later on. So that's what I was doing.
You got it.
But I had a question for you about this part specifically, and I have not seen this movie, so maybe I'm totally off base. But did this process of like removing the human emotion, intercutting with like the past lives or memories, remind you of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind at all? Because you talk about this movie a lot, and from what I understand, the premise is that Jim Carrey gets a procedure done that removes memories of his ex-girlfriend, right? And then I guess we see the memories of that relationship throughout that movie. So did this, when you were watching this, did that kind of spark a recollection to that movie at all, or no?
A little bit.
Okay.
Bit. I'd say there's some similarity there because it's mainly that purification process, and then also just flashing between the present and those emotions, because that is really what kind of happens in that movie. But yeah, he's only erasing memories from the relationship. He's not like in Eternal Sunshine. That's what he's doing. He's not just removing an entire his childhood from his brain or like a past life. Like it's very much like this relationship I had was emotionally devastating for me, and I want to just get it out of my head because I can't get over this breakup kind of deal. So yeah, there's definitely some similarities though, and I think I did see some correlations in other articles online between those two.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was really curious about that because my mind was drawn to that just based on the little I know about that movie. I know I still need to watch it. I've heard amazing things, but
it's one of my favorite movies of all time. If you have not seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, listeners and viewers, please go watch it. It is such a fantastic movie, even if it's over 20 years old now.
Yeah, whatever.
That's okay. But yeah, the ending of our 2044 time period, it's devastating because she keeps going back to this. She keeps running into Louise, at the purification facility and then at the nightclub, and they have this, mutual connection. They kind of recognize each other and see the humanity in each other, and they're both having these second thoughts about the purification process.
Yeah.
And then when they finally reunite again at the 60s club, they have this nice moment of just like they reconnect, and it's like, oh, it's gratifying. You're like, oh my gosh, yes, she's finally gonna have a happy ending. And then he mentions that he went through with the process and he just lost his human feelings, his human expressions. He's just not who he was before.
Yeah, he like wants to be together because it like makes sense because they've had this like long history throughout multiple lives. And it's like, I love too that it's like that's how the reveal happens. It's like it seems like everything's going to work out for a little bit. And he's like, oh, yeah, I mean, this all makes sense because, like, I saw these past lives of us when I was doing the procedure.
Yeah. It's like, no! She screams at the realization because she had thought she'd finally reconnected.
Yeah. She screams at the way she screams on the green screen at the beginning when she sees the beast. Right.
Yes.
Which we'll circle back to in just a moment, but
and we get that pigeon at the end indoors again, which is it's like, oh, that means she's gonna die at some point again soon, and the cycle's gonna repeat again. And I love that.
Or I kind of see it as it's the death of their love. And apparently this is, I've heard this before, but a bird flying into your house is an omen of death. It means it's a superstitious thing that means someone in the household will die in the near future. So yeah, that is mentioned in the movie, but it is a thing outside of this film as well. But yeah, before we talk about the beast, I want to talk about some like things that sort of tie in through all the different eras. There's a theme of altering oneself to better fit into society's mold for you. I'm not identifying it as much in the 1910 era, but maybe it's just marriage in that one. But in 2014, Gabrielle is advised to and considers getting plastic surgery to help with her modeling career, even though she probably does not need that. And then in 2044, Gabrielle also undergoes the DNA cleansing procedure to better fit into the mold of that society, although the procedure does not work on her. She is a small percentage of people that it just doesn't work for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting that is present throughout all of them.
Yeah, and I love how there's like they repeat so much stuff throughout it. Like, and we're going to talk about that here too, because a lot of these are just motifs that get repeated. But, I think when she goes to these clubs, she went to a club in 2014 and she tries to sit with some girls, talk to them. And they're just like, no, get away from us, loser, get lost, you stupid bitch kind of deal. And then I think she does it again in maybe it was 2044. I can't remember if it was in the present or if it was. Okay, yeah, so it was in both time periods, and they said like the exact same lines both times, which I thought was cool. But we have a lot of these recurring lines, like we'll get into that soon too. But I really liked a lot of these recurring motifs, like we already mentioned with the pigeons. Every time period, there was always a pigeon that flew indoors, and that was kind of just right before their death, which I thought was neat. And there's this recurring evergreen song too that keeps popping up. I don't really remember it from the 1910 era, or maybe it was just like a violin instrumental adaptation of it or something like that. But it was in 2014 and then 2044, and it just kind of, I think the evergreen nature of it is just our love or our relationship is evergreen. It's just going to keep going forever. Which I thought was beautiful. And then you have the dolls. There's a lot of dolls in this movie. The Doll Factory in 1910. You have the weird talking doll in 2014, and then Kelly, the AI doll, in 2044. Like, it's just weird that we got these dolls. I was kind of struggling to kind of pull together why the dolls were so present, but I don't know if you have a read on that.
Well, it may tie into what I said about like fitting into society's mold of you, right? Like being a model, being a doll, like
yes,
because dolls are meant to like represent the sort of like what they say about the expression, how they choose the expression for the doll. It's a neutral expression, so you can please everyone, and maybe that is about fitting into that mold, right? Like Gabrielle fits into the mold of high society in the 1910s. In 2014, she's seeking that surgery to, make her expression fit into what people expect of her. And then the dolls in the 2044 as well, and sort of tampering down on human emotions to make everyone more neutral in their emotional affectations as opposed to just like visual. So I think maybe that's why.
That's a great observation. I love that.
Thanks. We also get the fortune telling stuff, and is there maybe fortune telling? Well, I guess Kelly kind of has that premonition about the two of them like alone at the bar. So there's maybe that, but then we also have like the 1910 sort of. Maybe not tarot card reader, but like a clairvoyant. That's what it is.
Yes.
And then the lady on the computer in 2014 who are like doing the same type of thing and saying a lot of the same lines, but the vibe is very different.
Yes, right. Like, they're very different fortune tellers, but yeah, they're saying like the same things. Like he only makes love in his dreams, kinds of lines, and it's very spooky because there's a part of me that's like, well, which version of them are they talking about? Are they talking about the 1910 version? Are they talking about the 2014 version? Are they talking about the 2044? Like every single time I was like, are they talking about the same person that they want to learn more information about,
Right. And in the 2014 one especially, like just picking up that the guy is like an incel type, and then she's telling Gabrielle like I'm worried about your safety or something. He only makes love in his dreams, and then Lewis says something similar about like how he basically only has sex when he's asleep and stuff like that. And It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, it's really, really unsettling. And then you even have the part where she's like, I want to tell you this in private. Like, I don't want the person behind you to hear it as well. And
spooky.
yeah. And going back to the 2014 storyline and just the tension of it and how palpable it is, and it'll tie into the beast itself in a second too. But just so many opportunities that Gabrielle is asked if she needs help so many different times,
Yes.
and it's just like to be fair to her, she probably did not imagine what would happen, but it's like, come on, no, everything is not okay.
Yeah, like she's so blissfully unaware.
Mm-hmm.
There's like that one shot where she's like, she gets up to like go do something, and then outside in the glass,
Mm-hmm.
in that same shot, he's just standing there and walks away. It's like, girl, come on, use your eyes.
And then when the alarm system goes off and they ask her, like, after she says the password, like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, everything's fine. And then, oh God. And just knowing how those alarm systems work too was so infuriating for me, because if you can't get the password right, they send the police. So like, if she just hadn't been able to find the password, she still might have been saved just by that.
Oh my gosh. It is.
But
yeah, devastating.
But I think we've been saving it for the end because I think it's the most interesting discussion for us to have. But like, what is the Beast, right? The movie is called The Beast. Gabrielle describes this catastrophe that is looming and will destroy her life. So I think we both have, I think, slightly different interpretations of it. So I'll let you go first, and then I'll go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not 100% sold on my interpretation because I keep going back and forth on it a little bit. But I think, in general, I think the theme of the Beast, it carries from the novella a little bit here. I think it is fear incarnate. It's this inescapable dread of emotional catastrophe that continuously haunts us all. I think we all feel the Beast on some occasion. I think only adrenaline junkies probably don't feel the Beast always kind of ever present in their life. Yep. I think we all kind of do share this collective fear of some catastrophe. Something's going to happen to us, some big fateful thing that's just out of our control. But it's really difficult to say at the end of the day what it is. But what do you interpret the Beast as, Dylan?
So I was thinking about this, and I think I had my like realization like in the shower right before we recorded this. But I think I interpret the Beast as passivity, and because they have multiple opportunities across multiple lifetimes to be together, but they either drag their feet or become stuck in their existing worldview, so miss every opportunity until it is ultimately too late. So starting in, I was going to say 1910, Gabrielle stays with her husband far into her very clear infatuation with Luis. Like, she seems, like I said earlier, she's like content, comfortable with her husband, but doesn't really seem to love him or feel much passion there, right? And she only breaks things off with him in what seems like the morning that she's going to the doll factory with Luis, which is the day they die.
Yeah.
So she drags her feet far too long on that, so they never really get to explore their life together there. In 2014, Luis is presented with multiple opportunities to be with Gabrielle. Right? After the earthquake, she invites him into the house with her to, I guess, just hook up and take the edge off. And he refuses because he thinks she's trying to trick him because she's a pretty woman, and no beautiful woman would want to be with him because women are bitches, I guess, is kind of his mindset at this point. And then even later on in the movie, when she inexplicably is giving him a second chance in that moment. And I think it's because their like connection through past lives, right? That because she calls him her love in one of the visions she has. So it's like, I think that's playing a role there too. But like, he has an opportunity there also, but he's so entrenched in his like inceldom that he can't see it and chooses to kill her instead. And then in 2044, they are both actively pursuing a procedure that will fully dull them into complete passivity, right? To match with the rest of society. And like, Gabrielle's is a failure and she retains her autonomy, but Luis's is successful, and it takes away the, I interpret, final opportunity for them to truly connect and explore their love that they have been like so close to for multiple lifetimes. And on top of that, just circling back to the idea of passivity, Gabrielle doesn't even actively decide not to have the procedure, right? It just doesn't work. It's completely out of her control. And it's such a, like, I always talk about how I love active protagonists and how generally active protagonists are more compelling, right? Where it's like, it's why I like a character like Rey, where I don't really like Jyn Erso as much from Rogue One, because the plot happens to Jyn Erso rather than her driving the plot, for example.
Sure.
But like that, the passivity works here because it's important for the theme of the film, I think. And that's the beast, is just like fucking about and not pursuing what you really want for too long will mean that you never get it. You know, worry.
Yeah.
And that ties into what you were saying too, like worrying about the things you love falling apart to the degree that you never pursue them means that you will never experience that happiness in the first place.
I really like that interpretation. I think that is fitting for the film, and it connects. So I think also the beast, it can be multiple things too.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that passivity. It could be fear. It could be, it could be other things. It could be a literal beast, but it's
it could
not
be
really.
Jordan Peterson. King
it is
of the
incel
incels.
culture. That's it.
Yeah. But yeah, any final thoughts on the beast?
Like I said earlier, I think this is definitely a good film to watch, especially if you feel super entrenched in American cinema, or you're super tired of American cinema, or you want to challenge yourself with a fresh perspective, or just, get something that's just totally different than anything you've ever seen before. Like, I think this is a film worth watching and maybe even studying too.
Yeah, I think, and like I said at the beginning, I felt like almost overwhelmed to talk about it, sort of out of my depth, and I think we did okay, but I do think this is a film that will warrant multiple viewings and should be studied. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't think it's a revolutionary sentiment or anything, but it's like cinema is a language, right? There is the language of cinema, and I think the more films you watch actively, the more you increase your vocabulary of that language, and the more full your understanding is of the art form. And get out of your comfort zone a little bit. This was not like incredibly out there and like out of our comfort zones, I think, but it is something in terms of things we watch, but in terms of things we talk about and discuss on this show, very much outside of our wheelhouse. And I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we watched it, and I would recommend other people do the same.
Definitely.
Cool movie.
It's worth it. Worth the watch for sure.
But with that, let's hop into some other stuff for a little bit. Niles, what have you been watching recently?
Well, the boys are back. The boys are back in town.
The boys
are back in town. I love The Boys. It's so fun. I'm an episode behind right now, but I'm loving this fourth season. It's very fun, and it's on the nose. I feel like all their seasons are very on the nose, and that's what really works well about them. It's such a apt parody of like real life today, honestly.
Yeah. It's both kind of fun and sad. The right wingers have finally caught on. They understand it's about them now. They understand the show's making fun of them, and they're making like go woke, go broke videos about the boys.
If you guys couldn't see that coming for the past 4 seasons, you guys are idiots.
It's so stupid, man.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
I get a little concerned sometimes, and we'll definitely do an episode on the boys. I think once the season's over. But you know, on my Instagram feed, I see those like posts sometimes that just like the edits of Homelander, and it's just like I think people are idolizing him, and I don't really love that. But also, if you're idolizing him, you're also a psychopath, and it's very telling. If you're so, but it's so good.
Yeah, it's great. Another strong season, I think, and I think both of us are very happy that it has been announced that season 5 of The Boys will be the final season. We won.
Yes.
It's
Take
what
that,
we've been advocating for years, that The Boys like was a perfect 5-season show, and it's great.
It's so good, and I still need to finish that first season of Gen V, but like if they keep doing that kind of show, which I really liked, so I need to go back and finish that. Like they don't have to keep doing The Boys. They can keep doing stuff in the universe, but just not The Boys. Do something else, and that's what Gen V is. So yeah, loving The Boys. Going to talk about it more when this season's done. Otherwise, I've been pretty boring on my new stuff that I've been watching. I am literally three episodes away from the end of The Sopranos right now, and it's killing me every time I watch an episode. I'm like, no, I don't want this to end, but I know it's coming, and I know how it's going to end. But it is one of the best shows of all time. I think it's just so great. Definitely up there with The Wire for me. And also continuing on with RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars season 9, which I talked about on our last episode, I think. But yeah, they just bring back all these great queens, and they just compete, and it's all for charity, which is great. It's a fun time, and especially in Pride Month, I'm loving it. It's fun. What about you, Dylan? What have you been up to lately?
So I'm continuing on with the Cryptonomicon. Carrying on reading that, and you know what I've realized about it is it's extremely episodic. I don't know why it took me so long to like recognize, because I was getting frustrated with it in the first couple hundred pages, as you may remember from like 6 months ago or something when I was early on. But it's like I think I've now found the rhythm with it, because I would get a little annoyed when I would be like invested in something that was going on. I would hop to like the other 3 point of view characters and then come back to this character, and they're in like a different part of the world doing something different. And I'm like, you know what? I get it now. These are just like vignettes from all these people's lives that are connected and are sequential, but it's episodic. Each little chapter is going to be a pseudo complete thing. And now I think I've finally, after hundreds of pages, I understand what the book is like trying to do, and understanding it better.
Awesome.
So I like the book. It is still a dense read for me, but it's an interesting series of stories that I like a lot.
Nice.
But it is very male centric, I've realized. None of the point of view characters are women, and the romantic subplots are just kind of like guy develops interest in girl. Next time we see them, they're kind of together, maybe even getting married. And it's like, that's a little odd, but whatever.
Yeah, that is. Don't love that part, but whatever.
Yeah. And also been playing, not so much lately just because been so busy, but Assassin's Creed Syndicate, continuing on with that and enjoying it. Also, because the new Dragon Age looked kind of cool, I was like, I should go back and play Inquisition for real this time. Nice. So dip my toes back into that. And then last week, Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Erd Tree came out. So I've been diving back into Elden Ring, which is incredible, of course. Yeah. And I think it's so funny that like all of these people who, you know how the narrative by some like capital G gamers is that games journalists are just like not really good at video games, don't really play video games that well, and complain about it being too hard all the time. Well, all the games journalists fucking beat Shadow of the Erdtree, and now it's these capital G gamers are like, DLC too hard. It's not even fun. And it's
Pick a
well,
lane.
yeah, it's like, guys, it's a Souls-like. Being hard is kind of why you're here. And and also use the tools that the game provides to you in order to beat it. Like, they're just not engaging with the new systems that the DLC has introduced in order to help you progress. And they're like, why am I dying so quickly? It's like, well, you aren't using the things that boost your attack power and your defense power.
Yeah.
So maybe use those.
Yeah, it might change it for you.
Yeah. Also, House of the Dragon is back. We're 2 episodes into the new season. I'm really, really liking it. It's a great show. The fandom makes me so angry, though, and we'll talk about it when we do our episode on season 2. But it's like so much of the fandom is just like stans for mostly Rhaenyra, but like Rhaenyra or Alicent, and it's like, guys, engage with the show itself, please. Like,
yeah, just because you like one character doesn't mean they're the good guy.
Right. And it's like, that's not what makes this universe or these stories interesting, right? But I have found that, and we talked about it in our episode on season 1, like, remember how viciously people hated and hate Alicent Hightower? Like,
yes, I do remember that, yeah.
Okay. They're still on about it, and I saw a tweet that I really agreed with, and because it seems like most of the people who defend Alicent at all are men. And someone made a point where it seems like a lot of women fucking hate her because, unlike Rhaenyra, Alicent was not able to, like, break out of the mold the patriarchy has set aside for her. And it makes people uncomfortable to see a woman in such a subservient and, like, stuck in that structure. And I think, we'll talk about that more in our episode once you've watched the season. But it's like, I found that very interesting because it does seem like a lot of people are gravitating towards Rhaenyra because she's kind of like girl boss, does her own thing, does what she wants. And then Alicent is like, has turned to religion and become a mom and, does what her dad tells her to a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Well,
that's fun.
Yeah. But it's a good show. Like, if you liked season 1, you'll like season 2. The plot is really kicking into high gear. Also, been watching Star Wars: The Acolyte. I think we're halfway through the season. I think it's 8 episodes. It's decent. It's better than most Star Wars TV. At least it is fresh and something new. But it has all of the same, like, visual problems that Star Wars TV, except for Andor, has. It just looks kind of cheap. And some of the, like, blocking isn't great and all that stuff. But it's a new era, new characters, and talented performers. The main guy from Squid Game is in it,
right?
And he learned how to speak English to be in this show, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's neat. Good for him.
Yeah. And then, like you, been watching The Boys and loving it as usual.
The Boys.
The Boys. All right, but that is going to do it for us for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll be back in 2 weeks for something.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe Kinds of Kindness. I wanted to see Kinds of Kindness. That would be cool. And then after that, I think it'll be time to do The Boys, or pretty soon. So that'll be great. But
dope.
Yeah, so go watch cool stuff. Stay safe out there. And we'll see you guys back here in 2 weeks. But until then, Niles, where can people find you online?
On Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. What about you, Dylan? Where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at D-Day Movies, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, and you can find us both here, both on your podcast platform of choice, and on YouTube at Play Pause Rewind, as well as our second channel where our non-podcast videos live, called Play Pause Rewind videos, very creatively named. And we also have a TikTok. All of that is linked in the description. Please like and subscribe and share if you enjoyed the show. And to that one person who who listened to like 50 of our episodes last week, thanks. Wow. Welcome aboard. You're awesome.
Thanks, dude.
Really appreciate it.
What a homie.
Yeah, I know. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Bye.